Welcome to Unapologetically Sensitive, a place to find connection and a sense of belonging, where you can learn, relate, laugh, and maybe even live a bolder, brighter life. I'm your host, Patricia Young. This is a weekly podcast where we talk about sensitivity and the richness that it adds, the strengths we have because of our sensitivity, and some of the challenges it poses as well. The information in this podcast is not a substitute for help from a licensed mental health professional. There, to the creatives, healers, sensitives, and deep thinkers, welcome. This is the first part of a two-part episode that I recorded with Marcus Stricklin called The Experience of a Black Man in America. We made two recordings, and this is actually the second recording that I'm going to play for you first. My intention in sitting down with Marcus is I really wanted to offer a platform for someone who was Black to share their experience. And so in the first episode, I really let Marcus share what was on his heart and what he needed to talk about, and I really did not give very much input. We took a little bit of a break, and then we came back to do a second recording, and I asked for his permission because I'm really trying to make a shift here and really provide a place for someone who's Black to talk about their experience. But there were some things that felt really important for me to ask him about in this second interview, and my choice is to play this one first. I want to give you a couple of pieces of information, not only what you can expect in this interview, but some of the glitches that came up. Because we used a way to record that I don't normally use, there's some buffering, so there's some distortion in some of the words. It's just how it is. The first couple minutes, there's a noise that you hear, and I ask him about it. I leave it in the recording. It sounds like chirping. See if you can figure out what it is, and then he names what it is, and then he takes care of it, and the noise goes away. In this episode, he talks about what he's had to teach his son about what to do if he gets pulled over by the police, and how his son's friends who are white don't have to do this. He gives some amazing examples, what I call code switching. I asked Marcus about it, and he wasn't familiar with that term, but when I explained what it was, he has a term that he uses, and he talks about where it shows up. We talk about a couple of things vaguely in this episode. At the end, I'm going to come on and give you specifically what the research is, and I've put everything in the show notes. We reference a study, and I'm going to tell you what it is in the outro. We've referred to a movie, and I'm going to tell you what it is in the outro. I really tried to minimally edit this podcast or this episode. There's a lot of pauses in it, and it felt like it was really important to allow that time because this is what we needed to process, to think about. I didn't really comment a lot. Sometimes I wasn't familiar with what he was talking about. I didn't know what to say. And I also was really trying to be mindful to not change the narrative. And so if you're wondering, why aren't you saying something? These are some of the things that I was thinking about. I think you're really going to enjoy this episode. What I would really encourage you to do is if you have been touched by the death of George Floyd and the protests, and you really want to understand more about what white privilege looks like, you want to understand about the use of force by some law enforcement, you want to understand what you can do to make change, you want resources for how you can learn more, we may need to be a little bit uncomfortable if we are white and we have privilege. We can manage it. We can tolerate it. Marcus did such a beautiful job in this episode. And really, I almost wish that this, I feel like this sounds crazy. I think I got angrier on his behalf. And I had prepared myself for my white fragility to come up, and I gave him permission to address it if it came up, because I don't even feel like I have the language to talk about what's going on in the world right now. I feel about it incredibly deeply, and I really lack language to discuss it. And Marcus is just incredibly kind and sensitive and shared so openly about so many experiences that he's had and how he has experienced the world as a Black man and how inequitable it has been. If it is on your heart, I would really encourage you to allow yourself to be a little bit uncomfortable. This is what we want to do. It's not enough to say it's not fair what's going on. If we have privilege and we are remaining silent, we are contributing to the problem. You don't have to go out and protest. There are lots of ways that we can find to make a difference. For me, I'm choosing to use this platform because this is what works for me. So I really encourage you to keep an open mind. Know that there are lots of experiences. If you find yourself wanting to go, yes, but can you look at what goes on for you and just sit with that? I really think you're going to enjoy both of these episodes. I just can't be grateful enough for Marcus to be willing to be so open and honest. And now, on to the show. Hey, Marcus, welcome back.
Thank you.
So we made a decision to not process between recording and just to talk.
Mm-hmm.
You asked me how I'm doing. I'm exhausted. And here's what goes on for me. Like this, I'm someone who feels things really deeply. I have very high levels of empathy, and this isn't to take away from your experience. My guess is that many of the listeners of this podcast have been feeling that same heaviness and, just feeling it's sad, it's powerless, it's unfair. We have a strong sense of justice. And it's like, we need to be having these conversations. We need to learn how to manage to feel uncomfortable. We need to figure out how much to take in and how to take care of ourselves so that we don't overwhelm ourselves. But what's been going on for me since the protests started is I'm a white person. If I knew how to turn my head off, I could turn my head off and give myself a break. I'm not so great at that. I can't change the color of my skin. I can't walk away from this. I can't get a break. And so, as much heaviness and sadness as I feel, I don't have the option of walking away from this or taking a break. And so before we hit record, you said, I'm sorry. And it's like, what came up for me is like, I feel sorry for the things that I can't control, that are out of my control. And I don't even know how to articulate that. And as I was reflecting about this last interview that you and I did, the first one, it's so different from how I normally do an interview. And I'm having this like, did I respond enough? Should I have said something? And wanting to be empathic. And part of what I'm recognizing as a therapist and a highly sensitive person is the way that I relate is by sharing my own personal stories to be vulnerable and to connect. And as I'm learning about how to be a better listener, it means in this arena, withholding my stories and my heaviness to really wanting to be supportive and not make it about me. And as we've had this discussion in the Facebook group that we have for listeners of the podcast, we've been talking about that and how as people that are very empathic that use our own experience as a way to connect, this is not a time to do that. And so I'm just naming that like this is all new. I feel like all of my senses are on alert because I want to show up differently than I normally would. Yeah, it's intense. I don't even know what other, like I feel so freaking inarticulate. I would like to know how you're doing. And for this next part of the interview, are there things that you need from me? Are there things that I can do for you? And again, this is putting the burden on you, which is not my intention. And I don't know how else to do it.
No, so every problem has a solution. Do I think racism is going to be solved tomorrow? No, I don't.
That was the wrong answer.
No. But, I think more people, like there have been protests over the years of a unarmed Black man or woman being killed. But I think the one thing that I see more right now is an open dialogue and people finally seeing struggle of so many people. And they're starting, the veil has been pulled off. A lot of people are seeing the disparity of justice in this country. Now, don't get me wrong. There are white people who have died in similar manners. There's Tony Timpa in Dallas. He was an unarmed white man. He was very much done the same way. About a year ago, last July in Dallas, they kneeled on his back and he died. 14 minutes later, he died. There is that part of police the culture. This is not just a Black issue. When something like this happens, we realize it could be any one of us. And this is where I think the disconnect has been. When it happens to white people, I think a lot of white people, and I can't speak for you guys, I cannot. I have not seen them mobilize the way that Black people do because, and I'll say this, and this is why I can only speak for me. I cannot speak for you, and maybe you can answer this for me after, or you can respond after. Our fears of what happened to someone else, someone George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, that is our everyday fear. That even if you do everything the right way, that could be you. This is why Black people mobilize and they protest and they do these things, because we realize that at any given moment, that could be us based on our own experiences. You know, one of my biggest things that bothers me in this life is you could do everything right 1,000 times. And that one time, still get it, something could just go wrong and it could be you next. My heart breaks for anyone that dies. I am not a heartless person. I think anything that happens, I know when you die, you're not coming back. You get one life. I don't care if you're Black, white, any color on this planet. Life is precious. And when you die, you don't deserve to have your worst things you've ever done brought up. Yet that's what happens. Like I said, you could do everything right. Philando Castile did everything right. He was another unarmed Black man. He told the police officer, look, officer, there's a gun in the glove compartment. I have a permit. They still shot him. You could do everything right. And that's our fear. You could do everything right, but it's because people have a built-in fear and prejudice. Matter of fact, let me tell you this.
I'm going to stop.
Go ahead and answer, and then I'm going to tell you that.
I'm hearing a chirping in the background that I know is going to... Oh, do you have the fan on?
Just a second. I don't have anything on. Hold on a second. I hear it too. There's some birds outside the window.
Oh.
Yeah, there's two birds.
I made a note that said chirping, and it literally was chirping.
It was chirping, yes. Two birds having a conversation right outside the window.
Okay.
No, but can you, back to what we're saying, can you answer, do you have that fear?
Absolutely not. And here's something I'm embarrassed to admit. And I mean, this shows the embarrassingly huge discrepancy. I was telling my son during the summer and COVID, I've been using sidewalk chalk to release my inner darkness. If you look at it, it's very bright and cheerful. And somebody walked by one day, I just had a fight with my husband. It's like, it's to hide my inner demons. And I told my son the other day that I wanted to write Black Lives Matter. And I had this fear of, what if people vandalize our house? What if we have racists in our neighborhood and they vandalize our house? And I'm talking about chalk, and I have white privilege. I'm embarrassed to name this, and it's the truth. And what I'm sharing about my fear about writing Black Lives Matter in chalk in front of my house, and you having to fear for your life every single day when you go out. So no, I mean, I'm concerned about my house being vandalized. You're concerned about your life. Yeah. That there is something so inherently wrong with that.
But listen, I get it. I really do. This is just the reality. Like, everybody, we all live in the real world. We know how your reality, and you seem like a very beautiful soul, you know? But everybody's reality is different. And I think now more people are becoming aware of just the other reality. That's my experience. That's what I feel, is like, I just think more people are becoming aware. Like, wait a minute. There's actually two sides of this.
Well, and the ways that it's just a few bad cops. It's just a few bad apples, that we do that to minimize. I want to go back to a TikTok that you did with Chris Rock about just a few bad apples. I'd love for you to share that with us. It's interesting. When I went through school, there's a woman, and I don't know her name, and back in the 60s, she did an experiment with kids, and I went through this when I was in high school, where she told like kids with the brown eyes that they were better than the kids with the blue eyes, and everybody had to wear like blue and green collars in class. These were elementary school kids. And, whoever had the collars for the good eyes, got to go out early. They got to go to the drinking fountain first. They got privilege. And she used this as a way to talk about racism. I've seen a clip somewhere, and this is kind of how my brain works. Like, it's some white lady. I don't know who she is. If you have more information, maybe I can look it up.
I don't know, but I know the study.
She is giving a speech now to people, and she says, are there any, and this is a huge white audience, and she says something to the effect of, would any of you want to trade places with someone who's Black today? Like, are you so comfortable with how things are that you would want to be Black? Stand up. Stand up. How many people do you think stood up?
None.
So we can talk about how unfair things are, but until we really have to look at our own biases, and I am seeing so many of my own biases coming up as these protests have unfolded, I just have to sit with the discomfort. I mean, I just have to sit with it and look at it and try and figure out in what ways can I try and make a difference, not only with myself, but kind of moving forward.
But here's one thing that I've said this multiple times. I think until we're aware of our own biases, how are we ever supposed to correct them? How are we ever supposed to confront those biases? And I think a lot of people are starting to see that. And that is how the real change will come, is if you're seeing the way you are, then you're able to address it, and you're able to have these conversations, and you're able to move forward. That is when the change in this country will come. I can't speak for every country, but I know that, I say this, and I know that there are people who will never change. And I hate to say that. And I have seen it. I have seen the comments. I've been called N-words this week.
I am so sorry.
That word doesn't bother me. It's like, you know what? Educate yourself, okay? Educate yourself. Because let me tell you something. A lot of these people, and I have said this for years, those people that use that word, if you were in the front of a Black person and you said that word, you know that you would be getting yourself up off the ground the next second. That's why people are so emboldened online to do it, because they know there's no repercussions.
Yeah. Were you going to say something about the study, or were you just acknowledging?
No, I'm aware of the study. Yes. So yeah. I have seen that experiment, but that was an interesting about, no one. So did no one stand up?
Not one person. Yeah. And in the study that she did, you could see how the kids that were in the favored group started to, and I think that they were told that they were smarter, and, you could see how the unfavored group just diminished. And then the next day she said, I made a mistake, and she switched. But you could see the behavior and the attitudes just very, very powerful, very powerful. And these are just callers. Can you share a little bit about the Chris Rock? It's just a bad apple. I'm not asking you to do it verbatim, but
no. So it's one of my favorite TikToks, because this happens with. So the term bad apple, I actually don't like it, because whenever there is for instance, with just anything in this country, anytime something happens that's racial, when it's, say, a white group, they use, it's different terminologies for different groups. Say, for instance, a school shooter. A school shooter is a misunderstood young man. It is this. It is everything but what it is, a murderer. When a Black person commits a crime, that person is a criminal. When, for instance, I'll say this.
A thug.
When Mike Brown was killed in Ferguson, everything Mike Brown did bad in his life, a 17-year-old boy was drug up. and used against them. Now, I've seen the flip side of that. For instance, Brock Turner, a rapist, a convicted swimmer racist. I know more about Brock Turner and his swimming career and the medals he's won than the event that he did, than the thing that he did that ruined a young girl's life. And that is the biggest thing that gets me. It's like they use the term bad apples when it applies to them. So the Chris Rock bit was basically saying that you can't have bad, like, he was like, killed a crime, you should call it what it is. If it, in this case, if a cop killed an innocent black man, you should call it what it is. You shouldn't call it, oh, look, there's one bad apple. You should call him a murderer. That's what it is. Granted, I and many other black people think whenever this happens, there'll be no convictions. History tells us that there will be no convictions. So he's saying that you shouldn't call them bad apples, that you can't, in certain professions, you can't have bad days. Then he concludes the bit by saying, pilots can't have bad days. You can't have bad apples as pilots. Yeah, and he said he calls American Airlines out by name and says, you know what? American Airlines can say, yeah, we got a few bad apples. Most of our pilots are good. We got a few bad apples that like to crash in the mountains. You can't have that in certain professions. You can't have bad doctors. You can't have bad cops. You can't have bad pilots. But here we are. We do in every profession, seemingly, is what the analogy was, is as a cop, you shouldn't have bad apples. And you know what? As my mom used to say, a bad apple spoils the bunch. That is one of the things, Mom, I'd be like, what are you talking about, man? I'm like 6. What do you mean a bad apple spoils the bunch? But my mom used to say that to us growing up. Like, if there's one of you that's doing something bad, and she would explain it. My mom was a minister. She would explain it, what she meant. I'm like, gosh, what do you mean by a bad apple? If you see a bad apple in the bag, you're going to throw it out. And she would say, if there's one bad apple in a group of you, because there's five brothers. I have 4 other of me. 3 older. They're still alive. And my younger brother is unfortunately no longer with us. But she would tell us, if something happened in this house and all of you know who did it, but none of you speak up, you've spoiled the whole bunch is bad. That's until one of you is willing to tell who the bad apple is, the whole bag is considered spoiled. Yeah. And she'd punish everybody. She'd punish us all.
Wow.
You know?
Wow.
So she would use that analogy quite frequently if something happened. If, for instance, when we were kids, my dad was a military police officer. Mm-hmm. And for some reason, one day he left his handcuffs at home and took the keys. One of my older brothers thought it would be funny to handcuff my other brother. And we knew we would get in trouble. And nobody said, so we had to call my dad. And my mom came home. She was a nurse. She came home. She saw the brother handcuffed. She was like, I want somebody to tell me who did it, but nobody would say who did it. And that was probably the longest punishment. We were on punishment for like 2 months. No video games, no TV, whatever. Because nobody told, and she already knew who did it. She just wanted to hear it from us. But she used the bad apples analogy almost every week until someone finally spoiled on who did it. We finally told who did it. And that didn't end the punishment. It actually just made her more mad. She was like, we could have avoided all this. Mm. You would have just said it in the beginning. So she used that bad apples analogy a lot. Mm. And it applies to so many things. I will say this. When I first heard the term Black Lives Matter, I'm like so many people, I'm like, why is our lives matter? Why is this a thing? I didn't understand it. I was 33, that was 7 years ago. And then I educated myself on why they use that as Black Lives Matter. They wanted to be included in the conversation. Because if you look throughout history, people are mad right now. A lot of people who are the All Lives Matter crew are mad. I get it. I know this because I get a lot of comments about how I'm stupid and how all lives should matter. And I get all lives should actually matter. I do. I get it. A lot of people understand it. But it comes from this is not just about one police shooting. This is not just about two police shootings. This is about history, guys. This is about history. Black Lives Matter is brought to, we want to be included in the conversation, not just as a footnote of history. We don't want these events to keep happening. Do you think we like taking off time from our lives to go and protest? Do you think we like parades? Do you think we like highlighting an event that we thought people died for in the 60s and 70s? You think we like this? Black Lives Matter comes about because it's history. This is history. This is not just a police shooting. This is about hundreds of years of events, of people dying, of people with no repercussions. That's what this is about. Because we want justice brought to people. If you tell us that crime, we're a law and order country, laws were established. So you're going to tell me that a cop on duty who does something, in this case, let's go to current events. Let's go to George Floyd. You're going to tell me that this was necessary, that a man kneeling, a cop kneeling on a man's neck for 8 minutes. I don't care what George Floyd did in his life. I don't. People feel necessary when a man has died to drag the worst things about him up. He's a criminal. He served time for cocaine. Why do I care? I don't care what the man did. You mean to tell me this man deserved to die like that? This is your rationale? This is your rationale? What do you think is going to happen? Why do you think people are protesting? People are tired of it. People are tired of this happening. Yes, someone threw statistics at me. Okay, let's go into statistics, guys. 62% of this country is white. People don't want, people want to argue with me, but I will come at you with not only facts, but numbers. I am educated. I am smart. I have 2 bachelor's degrees. I could have got a master's degree, but I didn't want to waste my money and time. 62% of this country is white. 10 years ago, it was 75%. 13%. 10 years ago, the population, the black population was 12%. 10 years ago. In 10 years, it's only risen 1%, 13%. The amount of white people that have been shot by police in this country this year alone is 370 white people have been shot. You're talking about 62% of the population. So whatever the math, I suck at math, but now you look at the percentage of black people that have been 13% of the population. You're talking about 310 deaths by police. Look at the numbers. The numbers don't lie. We are killed at a higher rate than white people. I don't like the fact that anybody dies. Police job is to protect and serve. It is not to be judge, jury, and executioner. That is not a policeman's job. Their badge literally says to protect and serve. They are not the judge. That's why we have judicial laws in this country. That's why we have courts. We have due process that I hear is a good thing for a lot of people. But George Floyd won't be able to testify. Many people will not be able to testify because of the events. So Black Lives Matter is saying, look, our life matters, too. That is what Black Lives Matter is. It's not that we're trying to exclude all people. But let me ask a question. And when I have come at people with this who have deemed to argue with me, when I hit you with this fact, if you're so worried about white people dying by police shootings, How is it I have never seen one protest, one march? Let me tell you something. If white people mobilized in this country today and said, you know what, we're tired of white people and people in general dying in police custody, let me tell you something. Stuff would get done. Change would come tomorrow. And I asked people, I was like, you're sitting here telling me about white people. Look, man, I feel sorry that anybody dies. I really do. I'm not happy when anybody dies. There's a certain age where I'm like, okay, well, they're 90. Look, if you're over 90, you've lived a long life. I celebrate you, but I'm not sad you died. You lived through a lot of stuff. But you're talking about people who could have lived a little bit longer. They could have done anything. But I don't relish when anybody's killed. I don't relish when they die doing for a crime that, is not a punishable by death offense. I feel bad for those people. I really do. But one of my things that I've come back with people is like, what do you expect Black people to do? I'm sorry, but you're telling me about white people that have died in custody. I do feel bad for them. But what do you expect us to do? We kneel and protest. We try to have peaceful protests. It's a problem. How do you want us to do these things? The looting is an unfortunate thing. Believe me, I don't like the looting. But without this, would there be change? Would people care if there wasn't? You're talking about the protests and you're talking about the looting. The looters and the protests are not the same people.
Nope.
The looters are distracting from the protesting. But the message stands the same. We're tired of being killed.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you right now, and I'm going to be honest. And I've been honest. I posted this on Facebook. My Facebook is open. Anybody can see my Facebook. Let me tell you something. I have 2 Black sons. If somebody killed my son, my teenage son, I would burn this country to the ground. There would be nothing and nobody to stop me. And the person that did it, you guys just best arrest me now, because I will not sit idly by and let anybody get away with that. I've lived through a brother murdered. I grieve. I've not been the same person. I know Gunn, and he was an innocent bystander. He was just sitting in his house when someone shot up the house. I know these things, and I don't want the violence. I want change in this country. That is what I want. And I think a lot of people want the same thing. And I think a lot of people are starting to see the disparity and that change needs to come.
Well, and I think many people want to control the narrative. Do it peacefully.
Yes.
Take a knee. Well, that didn't work. Peaceful protest. That doesn't work. And then if there's looting or rioting or vandalism, then it's like, well, you shouldn't be so angry. Well, what the do you expect us to do? What is it going to take to be heard? And that this is where I feel like I get stuck in my words, but it's like a group of people that have been systematically oppressed since the beginning. What is it going to take? And why is it that white people can show up in government institutions with guns?
With guns.
They're not arrested. They're not shot at. There's no tear gas. And there's information about how this is good that people have, a voice, and then people protest, and then they're called thugs. It's just what you talked about in the previous episode that we recorded. It's like the bias is there. And so what are people supposed to do? You try legitimate ways of getting change done. That doesn't happen. And then things get out of control. And a lot of the riots and the looting are people that are looking for a place to create trouble that have nothing to do with Black Lives Matter. It's just a great way to let off some steam, because we're all, like you said, the world is upside down right now, but it's a distraction.
Yeah. And I, as I said many times, I believe every life on this earth is precious. I don't want to see anybody fail. I don't want to see anybody. I mean, life is fragile. Life is fleeting. Life is, what's the term I'm looking for? Life is just short. I want to see everybody prosper. I want every life to live the dream that they want to. Do I believe that's a reality, that we all achieve our dreams? No.
Well, and to me, the expression Black Lives Matter is not that other lives don't matter, but things are not equal. And I've heard a couple. I love analogies, so I've been just collecting them. And some of them that I've heard is, if you break a bone and you go to the hospital, they're not going to cast your whole body because all bones matter. Right. We're going to focus on the bone that needs fixing, and we're going to cast that. Or if you have a child that is unusually ill and needs more of your attention than your other children, does it mean that you're going to go, well, all my children matter, so this child's not going to get any extra time and attention? You can still love and care for all of your children and still give this child extra time. And then, I've seen the analogy about a house burning, or, having people come to eat and, one person isn't getting food, and you go, well, all lives matter and one person's not getting food. Go ahead. It looks like you want to say something.
Have you seen the Bible one where it's, there's 100 sheep and one goes missing? Mm-mm. There's
Is it on TikTok? That's where I get all of my information.
It is a TikTok, but apparently to summarize it's actually a Bible verse about, I don't know who it is, and I've read the Bible once, but I don't know what it, but it was this shepherd has 100 sheep, one goes missing, and the other sheep are like, hey, wait a minute, but don't we matter? And he's like, well, I have to go find this one sheep because that one sheep is lost. It's not that you don't matter. Mm-hmm. It's just that in order to make the flock whole, we need to find this one sheep.
Right.
And the guy who was doing it, I was just like, I've never read that part of the Bible but he put the Bible verse up, and I looked it up, and I was like, wow, that is that's actually pretty. It's in the Bible about, you need to find all your sheep. If your sheep's lost, your flock's not whole until you find that one sheep. And it was just like, that puts it in perspective. And I just want to say really quickly, I got called names because of this Michael Che Saturday Night Live TikTok that I did earlier this week about all lives matter. Mm-hmm.
I saw that one.
Yes. And a lot of people, I had to turn the comments off to that because people were very vicious. And one guy even sought me out because I turned the comments off. He sought me out on other videos to comment. And the All Lives Matter movement started after Black Lives Matter because they wanted to, as you say, change the narrative on the Black Lives Matter movement. And it's not that a lot of peaceful protests is just, we want accountability is what we march for. We want accountability. All lives do matter. Believe me, we understand that all lives matter. We just want other people to recognize that too. But to also change the narrative, they did the Blue Lives Matter. And gosh, nobody's saying cops' lives don't matter. We're saying that we don't feel that Black lives matter to anyone outside of Black lives. And even then, you say, well, if Black lives matter so much to Black people, one thing I've heard a lot this week is, well, can you explain Chicago to me? Why were there so many murders in Chicago this weekend? People are stupid. Every race has murder. There is a high rate of murder in the Black community. It is a very unfortunate thing that happened. Yeah, it needs to be addressed. Like we need, heck, I'll be honest, we need to police ourselves more. That's just this systemic problem, just up and down the line of, and it's something that is used against us a lot. Like, why do you care about Black life? One Black life. Why do you care about one Black life? Have you looked at the statistics on Chicago this weekend? How many murders were there? Yes, I do. I agree. I am agreeing with you. I think that it is a problem. Murder's a problem for anybody. Mm-hmm. But to be using it as a weapon against us, it's been weaponized a lot from the top of this country down to the bottom. I hear it a lot.
Yeah.
Chicago, Chicago, Chicago. Oh, look, there was 5 African Americans murdered each other this weekend in California. It's a problem. I get it.
Yeah.
But now it's not, it's kind of like school shootings. I'm going to try and relate this to that. When there's a school shooting and people are immediately calling for, we need gun reform in this country. And you have people that say, now's not the time. There always should be time for these things.
Mm-hmm.
There should be a conversation had about Black violence against other Black people. Black on Black crime is a problem.
Mm-hmm.
White on white crime is a problem. Every race has their problem. But it is weaponized in the Black against the Black community. It is every article or everything I've seen, George Floyd. But then you read this article and this person says, well, you know what? Why do people care about Black lives when they don't care about themselves? And it's just, it stings.
Yeah.
It stings. And it's just like, I know facts matter, but, I just wish that the two weren't related because it does take away from the conversation.
Yeah. Yeah.
We want justice. We want the same things that everybody should be afforded. We want due process. We want that. That's what Black Lives Matter is. We want,
right,
in the same way across the board. We want, yes, equal rights was given to us. Like if you watch the 13th, like we talked about in the first episode, equal rights was granted to us after Martin Luther King Jr. died.
Right.
But it's not equal. And that's where that is what we march for. This is what we do. I've been tear gassed before. I marched before. I've been tear gassed. I wasn't arrested, but I was tear gassed. I know this. I know what it's like to pour milk in your face. And I don't even like milk. To get this stinging out of your face.
Yeah.
For marching for, we want just justice for people. We want to be looked at as people.
Yeah.
It's always been this stigma of, since slavery, that we are second-class citizens. And sometimes some of the off-the-cuff remarks that people say, or the looks we get, reminds us that we are second-class citizens in a place that had to pass 1 trillion laws to make it equal. But it hasn't been equal. Regardless of what people want to say, regardless of, and that's something else that's been weaponized against us. Like, what else do you want? You've been given equal rights. If you can say, what else do you want? You've been given, then those rights aren't equal.
Yeah.
And I've heard that. I've heard that from people. Like, what else do you want from us? We've been given equal rights. I don't know, to be treated like a human, man.
Yeah.
That's what I want.
Yeah.
And I say this a lot. If aliens came down to Earth today, they're not going to be like, give me that white dude, give me that Black dude. They're going to just take people. They don't care what you look like.
Mm-hmm.
You're human. Mm-hmm. If they want a Black human, a white human, they don't care what color you are. They're just going to take you.
Yeah.
And that's how it should be in this country. I get you shouldn't see color. People see color. You see color. I see color. Everybody sees color. But is everybody treated equally? No.
Well, and I think that's where white privilege comes in. And I was just taking a walk with a friend today who was talking about in a Facebook group that she's in that somebody had posted about Black Lives Matter, and a white woman came in and talked about all the hardships that she had. And, it's like, well, what about me? And my friend was saying, how do I respond to that? What do I do? And it's hard, this whole concept of white privilege. So can we talk a little bit about white privilege, but maybe talk about it in terms of, and if, I don't know if you're comfortable sharing specifically about your son, but, what are some of the things that you and your son have to do and that you've had to tell your son? And I had a conversation with my son about white privilege the other day, and, My son listens to loud music. Like we hear him, we hear the bass from down the street
Mm-hmm.
before he gets home.
Mm-hmm.
And I talked about he drives erratically. He gets pissed off at drivers. I said, do you know how many times you would have been pulled over if you were Black? You stay out late, you wear your hoodies. We talked about this. And so I feel like I just did a crappy job of letting you say your part. But can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think people don't understand what white privilege is. And yeah.
Ooh. Oh, so when leading up, my son just turned 16. He's going to be a senior this year.
Okay.
He's a young senior.
Okay.
So he'll be 17 in the fall. So leading up to him getting his driver's license, I just had a lot of conversations with him about Blackness. If I could just tell how I told him.
Please.
You don't have the luxury that a lot of your friends have. Like I said, we live in a predominantly white neighborhood, but he has a diverse group of friends from different high schools. He's met most of them like through gaming and whatever. So, but he hangs out with a lot of diverse group people here. I was like, your friends can act a certain way, but you don't have that luxury, because if a cop pulls you over, guess who they're going to be looking at differently? It's you. If a cop sees you in a store, or if a store owner sees you in a store, I go in a store, I get followed in some stores. I have point blank told people, listen, you need to stop or I'm going to create a scene. I will throw stuff off the shelves if you keep following me through this store. I will give you the scene you're looking for. But I tell my son, I was like, you don't have that. You can't do this. When you go in a store, you have to act a certain way. You can't walk in with your hoodie up. You can't do that. Your friends can do that, but guess what? They want to see your face. They want to see that you have nothing to hide, no weapons. That's what they want to see. That's what they want. You have to give them what you want, because I don't want to turn on the news and see something has happened. I don't want to get a call saying something has happened. You know what I did for my son for his car? We gave him my 2008 Nissan Rogue. Actually, still pretty good condition, less than 120,000 miles when he got it. But with my experiences with the police, I took a copy of his driver's license, copy of the insurance. I took a pencil bag, like a small little pencil bag, put Velcro on the back, Velcroed it to the top of his dashboard. Why did I do that?
So he doesn't reach.
I don't want. That's exactly it.
Get shot.
And his friends have said, why do you have that? And then he has to explain it to them. Because if I reach, it could be my last reach, is what my dad said. It is right by the driver's side. So he tells the cop, I will leave my hands on the steering wheel. Everything you need is in that pencil pouch. You can just pull it off its Velcro. He's like, I get in my white friend's car, and guess what? They don't have that. I'm like, because they can reach. I'm going to tell a little quick story about white privilege, just really quick. So we have a daughter about, what year is it? 2018. Like I said, I get up early every morning. And I make lunches. I get up, I go to the gym, I come home. When they were in school, I'd make lunches for everybody. And my wife was going to an office, but I'd make everybody's lunch, everybody's breakfast. I'd have everything ready by the time they got up. So 5 o'clock in the morning, one morning, I was downstairs and we have a cat. And I thought our cat was throwing up in the upstairs hallway. And I was like, gosh, what is going on? It's early. It wasn't our cat. Our daughter was actually having a grand mal seizure. First time she's ever had one. Mm-hmm. That sound is stuck in my head. So anyways, we called an ambulance. Actually, her heart stopped. I had to give her CPR, which, as any stay-at-home parent, if you're listening, learn CPR. I learned. I took CPR class on my own. And the police came to the house. And I'm going to tell you this. When they first walked in, they saw my wife. They were cool. Like I said, my wife's white. They saw me. They put their hands on their weapons. Do you know how terrifying it was? Not only was I already terrified because I didn't know what was going on with our daughter. And I don't call them stepchildren. These are my children.
Mm-hmm.
I call them daughters, sons, whatever. But and then they put their hands on their weapons. And I was like, is there a reason why at 5:15 in the morning, when we called you to, matter of fact, we didn't call the police. We didn't call the police. We called an ambulance.
Right.
And the police showed up. Why are you in my house where I pay taxes, where I pay mortgage, a house I own? Why is your hands on your weapons? And they didn't answer me. I was like, you have 5 seconds to answer me or you're going to be leaving my house. Didn't answer. I was like, y'all gots to go. I don't care what comes about this, but there is no reason to be in my house with your hands on your weapon, on your service weapon, while we're in the middle of a crisis. Let me tell you something. It was terrifying on many fronts because my 16-year-old, 15-year-old at the time, he was sitting on the couch. This woke everybody up. It's 5:00 in the morning, about an hour and a half before everybody gets up. We got everybody up and they walk in. They see me, they see my wife, they see me and my son, and they put their hands on their weapons.
Unbelievable.
It was unbelievable. And you're talking about a time when everybody's emotional. I'm like, there is literally no reason why you should have your hand on your service weapon. Because I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to move around my house.
Yeah.
I'm going to reach for stuff in my house. I should feel safe in my house. And you are making this feel unsafe right now.
Yeah.
So it was that is our, I mean, we have other experiences with white privilege, but those are some of the ones where I've had to explain to my son why things are the way they are, why we are looked down on unfavorably, unfortunately, no matter what we've done. We are, like I said, we are law-abiding citizens. We do everything by the book. We do everything. I'm very active at my kid's school. I was on the PTSO board up until this month, until I can't do this with you guys. You guys are nuts.
Yeah.
No, until I, let the term expire. Nice, great people, but I just couldn't do it anymore. Very active in the school and in certain areas of the community. And it doesn't change the fact that no matter what, some people have that prejudice, and no matter what I do, no matter what anybody does, they will always have those preconceived notions of Black people. And that's just the reality of the situation.
Yeah. When I was walking with a friend this morning, she brought up something I hadn't even thought about. How many times have I been grocery shopping and I'm thirsty or my kid's thirsty? We crack open something that we're going to pay for. We're hungry. We open something to snack on while we shop. I have never given that a second thought. And what we talked about is like, if we were Black, the cops could be called. That's what white privilege is. And it's like, I know I'm good for my money. And she gave the example too of, if she had COVID just stresses my brain out. I feel like I just can't even speak. If she had money that was counterfeit, if she were at a store and gave it to a clerk, the clerk would probably shrug it off. A Black person gives counterfeit money, it's intentional. The action that would be taken is different, that we have so many ways that we navigate through the world without even thinking about it, that if we were Black,
Well, and I don't know all the specifics of the case, but since you brought up counterfeit, that is one of the things that they said they got George Floyd on, was he tried to pass a counterfeit bill buying food, buying something at the store, and that's why he was arrested. So, yeah.
Trying to feed your family.
Yeah, trying to feed your family, trying to live, trying to just be.
Can we talk a little bit about code switching and what that is? Are you able to speak to that?
I don't know what code switching is. Can you explain it to me? And I might actually know, it might be like a different name.
Yeah. My understanding is that it's what some Black people do to make us white people feel more comfortable. So with your own friends and family, you may have a certain way of talking or swearing or tone of voice. And then, I would imagine like the place I could definitely see it with officers, yes, sir, no, sir. but it's really what Black people do to make us white people feel more comfortable.
Oh boy. Yeah, but we call that, okay, I'm going to give you guys the term I use, but we call it becoming white. We call it up-whiting, white up. There was a movie a couple years ago, can't remember, but it's called Using Your White Voice. That's not the name of the movie. The movie is called, I can't remember the name, but if you Google Use Your White Voice, I guarantee you'll see the trailer for this movie.
Okay.
But every Black person does have a white voice when they are talking to an officer. I don't call them sir. I'll just be like, but I talk with English, and I use my actual voice, articulate, but sometimes when I'm having for instance, I'll say this: when I first met my wife's parents, I've actually wanted to do a TikTok about this, about when people first meet me. White people first meet me, I'm like very buckled up, but when you get to know me, I'm like, I'm just like crazy, But I've learned to, as I told my son, you have to be a certain way around people. You have to give them the perception that you are, and it's not that you're not friendly, it's not that you're not nice, but they look at you and they see thug, and so you have to talk to them. I've actually had people say to me, you don't talk like I thought you would. Or one thing that actually pisses me off more than anything is when they were like, you're really articulate. Like, what do you expect me to be? What did you expect me to be? Did you expect me to be every other word is an N word out of my mouth? I don't even like the word, but I just want to know, what did you expect? I can sit here and have a history conversation. I can teach you something. I can teach anybody anything because I know a lot about nothing. I have a lot of information about stupid things in my head or just history. Yes, we do talk differently. I know a lot of Black people that do that, especially in predominantly white areas. We talk, I will say I talk differently when I get around white people. I won't have my music up as much. Like when I'm driving, I drive between California and Arizona a lot. When I had to drive to pick up my son, he at his mom's house. He lives with us full time now. But when I had to drive, I would turn my music up and drive. But if we get pulled over by the police, it's instinct. Music off, hands on the steering wheel. You change your body language. And it's honestly, it was not anything that was taught to me. I taught my son. I did it off instinct because I've seen TV shows. I lived in Los Angeles when Rodney King was shot. I was there with my grandmother when the riots were in LA. I was there when OJ verdict. I was there. And she still lives there, but I've been there for a lot of the things that have happened. And my grandmother had once said, when I was much older, she was just like, she was born in like 1930s, but she said she's just adapted to being that way. And she sees that I've adapted to that way. And I know nowadays, a lot of Black people don't do it, but it's just so ingrained in me that I've learned how to just talk around people. But then if we become friends and I know you, whatever, man, you're going to get the real me. Mm-hmm. I'll drop some cuss words in there. I'll sprinkle in some sentence enhancers. I will. But if we're having a chance encounter, I won't be me. I'm a shell of me to get a point across. And my son is the same way in the beginning. And I've just told him this is an unfortunate side effect of the world and their view of Black people.
Yeah.
And that's honestly just how it is. But yeah, we do have a white voice. We do. It's just something a lot of Black people we use it to get along. That's the saying, you get along to get along. Yeah, it's just a perception that we've kind of adapted unfortunately, to survive and get along with different, with white people.
Well, even criticism about saying acts instead of ask
Yeah.
or ain't.
Ask, yes.
And the expectation is that you should be speaking proper English as opposed to honoring the linguistics each culture uses, and that's just as valid. But go ahead. I interrupted you.
Oh no, you're fine. You bring up a good point, because I've had people be like, "Well, it's a good thing you didn't ask me a question." And I'm like, "Do you think you're funny?" Like, people don't realize. Like, look, I can be nice, but I am extremely petty, and I will use your words against you and make you look stupid. That is probably one of my favorite characteristics just about me is I will not. We've been taught to be silent. If somebody white says something to you, you shouldn't retaliate because you don't know what they're going through. Why? Why? If they're bold enough to say something to me, I'm bold enough to say something back. That's just, my mom would tell me that. She actually told us we should be silent, but then later on, she's just like, you know what? I was wrong. I think you should reply. I'm like, I've been replying. I'm not going to let somebody sit here and say something to me, because if you keep letting them say it to you, guess what? Then you've created a problem. You've created a behavior that is going to be hard to break with people.
Yeah.
People say something to me, my first instinct is like, what gives you the right to say that to me ever?
Yeah.
Who do you think you are talking to?
Yeah.
I may look nice. I may appear nice. I may appear as a friendly Black person, but let me inform you that I will not tolerate you talking to me like that ever.
Yeah, I love that. I love a lot of the assertion that you've talked about in both of these interviews about knowing the laws, knowing your rights, having a voice, using your voice. Not everybody is there. And I love hearing that.
I just, like I said, I think, like I said in the first interview, I think in order for this country to change, we need to have this open dialogue. Is everybody going to understand? No.
Yeah.
We will, in some people's eyes, I believe Black people will always be considered a second-class citizen. I have seen it. I have heard it. I have seen it for like maybe the last 4 to 5 years in this country. Just people are saying things that probably the first 34 years of my life, I will admit, I will say this, I was under the impression, and this might sound naive, and this is because I'm a small town person, but I was under the impression that every place in America was like a small town. When I moved here, when I moved to a bigger city, I was under the assumption that small town America was very much the reflection of what big city America is. And that, heck yes, racism's been solved, but it has not.
Mm-mm.
I was a fool to think that.
You are an optimist. You are an optimist.
I am.
Hopeful.
I am an eternal. I still am. I still think that there is good in people, and I want to teach people to understand and have an open dialogue. And that's all I've been trying to encourage since Sunday is talk to me. You want to know something? Talk to me. I'm not afraid to tell you anything. I've told my wife some of the stories, and I try to shield her from it, and she's going to listen to this podcast. I left a lot of details out that I actually went into detail with you, and I told her in between the first and second this episode, I told her that there was a lot of details I didn't put in there, but I actually told today on the first podcast the other day, and this one, I left out details because I didn't want you to look at me differently. Like, I know this sounds bad, and I actually talked about it in one of my TikToks. I feel a sense of embarrassment for the things that have happened in some way, because I thought and it's mostly because of how naive I was that these things actually happened to me. And then I think about it, but wait a minute, it's happened to so many other people. So many people who's been like, I didn't know these things go on in America. Yes, they do.
Yeah.
It's just that we're not always willing and open to talk about it. Like I said, I felt, and I still feel a level of embarrassment, and nothing anyone ever says could change how embarrassed I feel about some of the things that have transpired, because it just made me feel like less of a human to be treated in those manners that way when I try to be a good person to people.
So here's what's going on for me. I'm reviewing over our
Go for it.
conversation, and there's nothing that I can recall you saying that I would deem as embarrassing. So here's what I'm wondering. Is it some of the encounters that you had with police?
Yes.
So
that's exactly it.
So here's what I'm wondering. If you internalized the shame of how they treated you because you were so powerless. Because from my eyes, it was an abuse of power. I'm getting emotional and I'm okay with that. It was an abuse of power. You were traumatized. Every time that happened, that is trauma. And you were powerless. You wondered if you would survive. You wondered about your life. It was unfair. Nobody apologized. Nobody owned it. Nobody named it. And my guess is that this is not something that until now or in small groups, people don't talk about. And so we internalize this sense of I must have done something wrong. It's like, yeah, I got in my car and I drove it home, the one that I bought and paid for and had the paperwork next to me on the seat. And the officer didn't want to look at that because of his own agenda. So I sat in the rain for an hour in handcuffs with no explanation. Like, you didn't do anything wrong. You were traumatized, and you've been systematically re-traumatized and re-traumatized and re-traumatized. And nobody has said that shouldn't have happened to you. That was an egregious abuse of power that has happened repeatedly. And I just feel pain that you've internalized that abuse of power, because that shouldn't have happened. You shouldn't have been pulled over on your bicycle. All of the things that you've shared should not have happened. And it probably would not happen if you were white. If the color of your skin was different, it probably would not have happened.
Yeah, I agree. And that's part of the shame of why I know I've internalized it. Outside of a few Facebook posts over the years, I never really talk about it. Yeah. And the only reason why I brought it up for TikTok is because it just seeing George I tend not to want to watch these videos of people dying. I don't want to watch it. When even Ahmaud Arbery out for a run, it just, whatever happened. Did a man deserve to be shot and killed? Did a man deserve to be having his neck? And it just brings up, how, if anything goes wrong, am I sitting here talking to you? Am I married to probably the love of, am I married to the love of my life? Am I married with 5 children? If anything goes wrong in any of those encounters, they could have played out any differently. And that's why I made the TikTok about my experiences with the police. And even the version you got, that was like the 7th recording of trying to get it and summarize the story, because I was trying to put it into words on what I could say. And I wasn't at all trying to make it about me. Listen, I'm still alive. I'm still breathing. I'm still going to, go barbecue in a little bit and spend time with my family as I do every day since quarantine and before quarantine. We're actually a very tight-knit little family. And I wasn't trying to make it about me. I just wanted people to be aware that, look, these things are not isolated events. Mm-mm. And that any given day, so if I can summarize like I did on Facebook the other day, in any given day, I could be pulled over. And honestly, the way I said it on Facebook is that if a cop is having a good day, that's the difference between me being alive And if he's having a bad day and anything going wrong, literally anything going wrong, if he's having a bad day because he got into an argument with his wife, that is how I feel.
Yeah.
I cannot speak for anybody else, but that is what I feel. I feel that all of my instances could have went horribly wrong if any of these cops are having a bad day, or if I move the wrong way, or if I reach for the wrong thing. I could have been a statistic on the news. People could have been marching for me. That is what I feel. And that is what I feel for my son. My toddler, he's 2. I don't worry. I don't have that worry for him yet. I have another 14 years of that, of letting him be a child before I have to have a conversation with him.
It's okay.
So, I just don't want to have that conversation, but I know I'm going to, because I know that change is slow in this country,
Mm-hmm.
and I just don't want that. So that is the reason why I made the original TikTok, and this is why I'm trying to educate people, because I want a different life for my children,
Mm-hmm.
all of them, not just the 2 black sons that I have. I want it for my 3 white daughters too.
Mm-hmm.
I want change. I don't want them to have to be out in the streets protesting when they get older, although they will anyway. For various reasons, they'll be out there protesting, but I don't want that for them. I don't want that for any of them.
My hope is that for anybody that's listening to this podcast, that is reading articles, that is looking at resources and watching movies and getting educated and hearing people's stories, it has to create some type of change. It just has to. And I'll tell you, since all of this started, I've been going in and out of hopelessness, because it just, it feels like the year of 2020. I don't even know what to say, and the lack of leadership and consistency. And I just have to hope on some level that this is affecting change. It's got to be for good. There has to be a reason to it, because it feels like the world is just absolutely upside down. Mm-hmm. And people are coming together. We're having conversations. Is it going to fix it and change it overnight? No. Oh, heavy sigh. Mm-hmm. Marcus, where can people find you on social? And I will put all this stuff in the show notes at unapologeticallysensitive.com. Go to this episode, click on it. It will be in the show notes. And I have the resources that you put on TikTok. I will put all of those in the show notes for both episodes as well.
My Twitter is Marcus the Token.
Is there an underscore in there?
Nope, okay. No underscores, just Marcus the Token. Okay. That has been my longtime Twitter handle for, like 11 years now.
Okay.
My TikTok is Stricklin Family.
And that's Stricklin.
Yes, family. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. And then my Facebook is Marcus A. Stricklin. And I think my profile picture now is a picture of me and my wife laughing at our wedding a couple years ago, which is my favorite picture. We were laughing at something stupid. Yeah. Instagram is also Marcus the Token. And I've actually been toying around with changing my TikTok name, but I haven't gotten around to doing it yet. But for now, it's still Stricklin Family.
Okay. Is there anything in closing that we didn't talk about that feels important for you to share?
Just something really quickly. I just think that it is important that everybody just take a second and breathe and know that we're like all in this together. Mm-hmm. That if you want to reach out and talk, I am willing to talk to anybody, help you understand issues, have a dialogue with you, be your friend, and just help in any way that you can. And in return, I'm willing to listen and learn too. It's not just a one-way street. People have given me recommendations on things, and I've been making a list of things to watch and read, and I'm really enjoying it. This has been an eye-opening week for me both ways. And I just want people to know that it's okay. And you know what? We're all going to get through this together. And as long as we're all willing to come together and try and make change in this world, we're going to get through this eventually.
I love it. That's a beautiful message. I'm so tense. We've been
I
recording.
know. I'm
Go ahead.
I know. I feel you. I'm tense. I'm gonna go have a drink after this is over.
I eat, so I've been trying to think what I could go eat when we get off the phone. Between recording, we're like, what do you need? It's like a Valium and Obama. I really appreciate you taking, 2.5 hours of your time to sit down and record with me. You don't know me. I just reached out to you. I just feel like
I feel like I know you. I feel like I know you now. Like we should be friends for real.
I would love that. I would be honored.
So,
I really would be.
perfect.
All right, Marcus, thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you very much.
Again, pretty powerful episode, huh? Did you shed any tears? I did. A couple of the things that I want to talk about that we referenced in the episode. The movie that Marcus is referring is called Sorry to Bother You, and the clip is called Use Your White Voice, and that clip is in the show notes at unapologeticallysensitive.com. You can go to the podcast page, click on the episode, and it will be there in the show notes. I'm hoping by the time you hear this episode will be up on my website. The study that I was talking about with Jane Elliott, and there are two YouTube clips that I put in the show notes, and the exact wording that she said is, if white folks wanted to be treated like black folks, please stand. Nobody stood. That says something. And then Marcus talks about some statistics, and because I wasn't able to convert what he did, I did a search, and this is from the BBC. What this article talks about, and it's in the show notes, is the percentage of fatal police shootings compared to population by ethnicity. So the white population is 60.4%, and the number of whites killed is 36.8%. The African community is 13.4% of the population. 23.4% of police shootings have been in the African American community. That's huge. If this episode moves you, please follow Marcus on social media. He posted on TikTok a list of resources. Everything that we've talked about in this episode is listed in the show notes. Please reach out to him. We have got to make changes. This is the time. If you are someone who is feeling very deeply about the world right now and it feels like it's upside down and the injustices, we can use our power to vote, to sign initiatives. There are so many things that we can do to make a difference. So please use the pain that you're feeling to make a change in the world. Thank you so much for being here. I'm going to get working on editing the second episode. I will get it out as soon as I can. It's just a lot to do. Thank you again. Remember, sensitivity is nothing to apologize for. It's our superpower. Have a blessed day.